The Sports Network is a Canadian English-language sports specialty service. Established by the Labatt Brewing Company in 1984 as part of the first group of Canadian specialty cable channels, since 2001, TSN has been majority-owned by communications conglomerate Bell Canada with a minority stake held by ESPN Inc. via a 20% share in the Bell Media subsidiary CTV Specialty Television. TSN is the largest specialty channel in Canada in terms of gross revenue, with a total of $400.4 million in revenue in 2013. TSN's networks focus on sports-related programming, including live and recorded event telecasts, sports talk shows, and other original programming. TSN was the first, and most recent national cable broadcaster of the National Hockey League in Canada. Its stint has been interrupted twice by rival network Sportsnet. Most recently as of the 2014-15 season under an exclusive 12-year rights deal. TSN holds regional television rights to 3 of the NHL's 7 Canadian franchises. As of 2015, major programming rights held by TSN include exclusive coverage of the Canadian Football League and Curling Canada's national championships, coverage of the NBA and the Toronto Raptors, coverage of Major League Soccer and exclusive rights to Vancouver Whitecaps FC, along with Canadian rights to the tournaments of FIFA and the IIHF, the NFL, Formula One, NASCAR, the Premier League, the Uefa Champions League, Ultimate Fighting Championship, and the Grand Slam tennis tournaments, among others. TSN also receives a large amount of programming through its minority partner, ESPN. The TSN license currently comprises 5 24-hour programming services. From its launch until 2006, TSN operated as a single, national service. In 2006, the Canadian Radio Television and Telecommunications Commission ruled that TSN could operate multiple feeds with a limited amount of alternative national programming. This was followed by the launch of TSN2, a second 24-hour network under the TSN license that was legally considered a West Coast feed of TSN. As of 2010, TSN has been subject to deregulated Category C licensing by the CRTC, which allows multiple feeds to be operated under the TSN license with no restrictions on alternate programming. TSN used this new ability to operate an autonomous TSN2, along with part-time feeds for regional NHL coverage. On August 25, 2014, the primary TSN service was restructured into 4 24-hour feeds: TSN1, TSN3, TSN4, and TSN5, with each designated as the primary TSN network for each region of Canada. TSN now essentially operates as a group of regional sports networks similarly to Sportsnet, alongside the national TSN2. The 4 channels air some common programming and simulcast major events, but are capable of airing programming autonomously, including alternative national events and studio shows, and regional programming. History. Early history. Licensed by the Canadian Radio Television and Telecommunications Commission on April 2, 1984 as Action Canada Sports Network, the channel was launched by the Labatt Brewing Company on September 1 of the same year as the Sports Network, or TSN. The network was founded under the leadership of Gordon Craig, a former employee of CBC Sports. Alongside coverage of the co-owned Toronto Blue Jays, TSN also reached a deal with ESPN shortly before launch to provide additional programs. Although reaching around 400,000 subscribers, TSN's early years were hindered by its initial status as a premium service, bundled in a high-cost package with movie channels such as First Choice and Super Canal, alongside competition with free-to-air sports broadcasts by CBC Television among others. To improve the prominence of the network, TSN sought to obtain the national cable rights to the National Hockey League Uefa rights that, according to the league, were not sold under the current arrangement with CBC. However, the task was complicated by claims by CBC that it owned the cable rights to the NHL, along with the involvement of competing beer company Molson in Canadian NHL rights at the time. With the help of a Molson employee who was a friend of Gordon, a deal was reached between TSN, Molson, and the NHL to allow the network to broadcast games on cable. By December 1987, TSN had reached 1 million subscribers, but the network's staff sought wider distribution for the channel as part of basic cable service. The CRTC approved the network's request for permission to allow TSN to be carried as part of a basic cable lineup. Mike Day, producer of TSN's daily sports news program Sports Desk, lamented about the shift to basic cable and the larger audience it would bring, commenting that one night you're doing a news show that potentially has an audience of 1 million people, and the next day the potential is 5 million people. In 1991, TSN acquired rights to the IIHF World U20 Championship, otherwise known as the World Juniors, which were previously broadcast by CBC. TSN's coverage, along with a recent punch-up in Piestini incident and a strong performance by Canada at the tournament in the mid-1990s, helped to significantly heighten the profile of the tournament in the country, to the point that it is, alongside U.S. college football bowl games, regarded as a traditional sporting event of the holiday season in Canada. Due to CRTC regulations on the foreign ownership of broadcasters, Labatt was forced to sell TSN and ADS upon its acquisition by Interbrew in 1995. Labatt's broadcasting assets were sold to a privately held consortium named Netstar Communications, the investors of which included a number of Canadian firms as well as ESPN Inc, which held an interest of about 30%. The sports network launched its website TSN Car on October 1, 1995. In 1997, the CRTC began permitting TSN to offer an alternate feed, which could be used to provide a regional opt-out of the main TSN service for programming that must be blacked out in the rest of the country. Alternate programming could make up a maximum of 10% of the TSN schedule, an average of 2.4 hours a day. Acquisition by CTV, expansion equals, in 2000, after ESPN blocked 2 attempts by the Canadian partners to sell Netstar to CanWest, CTV Inc. acquired the Canadian partners' shares. CTV Inc. was acquired by Bell Canada and the Woodbridge Company as part of the joint venture Bell Globe Media in 2001. As a result of its purchase of TSN, CTV would be forced to sell its regional sports network CTV Sportsnet, eventually selling it to minority shareholder Rogers Media. Following the acquisition, TSN would move its operations to CTV's Agincourt complex. However, Sportsnet would not move from Agincourt until 2008, which led to the now competing networks sharing the same building as their headquarters. This oddity would become an inside joke between personalities on both networks, who commonly referred to jumping between the two networks as crossing the parking lot. Following the sale, TSN began to closer align its on-air imaging with that of ESPN. The most prominent effect of these changes came with the rebranding of TSN's flagship sports news program Sports Desk as Sportscenter, a Canadian version of ESPN's Sportscenter. TSN also launched a number of digital specialty channels in 2001. Including a local version of ESPN Classic, the NHL Network, a network devoted to ice hockey and the National Hockey League, and WTSN, a channel dedicated to women's sports. On August 15, 2003, TSN became one of the first 2 specialty television services in Canada to be available in high definition. TSN's first live HD broadcast was of a Canadian Football League game between the Montreal Alouettes and Hamilton Tiger Cats. It was to occur on the same day, but was delayed to August 16 due to a major blackout which occurred the day prior. Beginning in 2006, the CRTC officially allowed TSN to operate national secondary digital feeds with limited amounts of alternative programming. Following this development, TSN began to use such a feed to broadcast additional programming that could not be aired on TSN due to scheduling conflicts or other events. On August 29, 2008, the feed evolved into a new 24-hour channel, similar to ESPN2, known as TSN2. Upon its launch, TSN2 was legally considered a West Coast time shift feed of TSN, although soon after TSN2 was launched, the CRTC announced a proposal to remove genre exclusivity protections for mainstream sports and national news channels in the near future. As a byproduct of the decision, TSN would be allowed to use streamlined conditions of license, which state that the service may offer multiple feeds, without any restrictions on alternate programming. TSN was officially permitted to use these streamlined conditions of license on February 1, 2010. Acquisition by Bell, TSN Radio. On September 10, 2010, Bell Canada announced plans to reacquire 100% of CTV Globemedia's broadcasting arm, including its majority control of TSN. Under the deal, Woodbridge Company Limited, Torstar, and the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan would together receive $1.3 billion in either cash or equity in BCE, while BCE would also assume $1.7 billion in debt. Woodbridge has since simultaneously regained majority control of the Globe and Mail, with Bell retaining a 15% interest in December 2010. The deal closed on April 1, 2011, after the CRTC approved the sale on March 7, 2011. The new company became known as Bell Media. After a long-standing speculation about TSN's interest in launching its own TSN-branded radio network, TSN entered radio broadcasting with the launch of the first TSN radio station, a relaunch of AM station Chum in Toronto on April 13, 2011. Bell Media's Bell Media Radio division already operated several sports radio stations elsewhere in Canada. It was reported that Bell could theoretically relaunch these other stations under the TSN radio brand in the future. Also in 2011, TSN acquired broadcast rights to the returning Winnipeg Jets. TSN would establish another part-time feed, TSN Jets, to broadcast the games. Additionally, co-owned CFW would also gain radio rights to the new Jets. CFW, along with Montreal station CKGM, also migrated to the TSN radio brand on October 5, 2011. Additionally, Bell would also launch TSN Mobile TV, streaming versions of TSN and TSN2 offered through Bell Mobility's mobile TV services. On December 9, 2011, the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan announced that it would sell its majority stake in Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment to two major telecommunications companies, Bell Canada and Rogers Communications, with a 37.5% share each, in a deal expected to be valued at around $1.32 billion in total. The deal was completed in summer 2012, following the approval of Canada's Competition Bureau, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, as well as the leagues for each of MLSE's main sports franchises. The deal was expected to have a major impact on future broadcast rights for MLSE's teams, including the Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Raptors, as their ownership of the teams will offer enhanced coverage for the team through new platforms such as mobile television. In March 2014, TSN launched its TV Everywhere service TSN Go, allowing subscribers to TSN on participating service providers to stream TSN networks online or through a mobile app. On launch, TSN Go was available exclusively to Bell TV and Rogers Cable subscribers. It has since been expanded to other providers, such as Shaw. Loss of national NHL rights, expansion into regional service. Following the announcement of Bell and Rogers' acquisition of MLSE, concerns were again raised by critics, speculating that Bell Media could attempt to acquire full rights to the NHL after CBC's current contract with the league expires in the 2013-14 season. Using their ownership of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the NHL's highest valued franchise, as an impetus for such a coup. Concerns were also raised that such an arrangement could prevent wireless service providers other than Bell and Rogers from accessing its content. The CRTC had ruled in favor of TELUS in a decision requiring Bell and other media companies to allow other competing wireless providers access to its content, and not exclusively tie it to their own service. However, in November 2013, Rogers Communications announced that it had reached a 12-year deal to become the sole national television rights holder of the NHL, beginning in the 2014-15 season. Critics considered Rogers' move to be a major blow against Bell and TSN, showing concerns for how the network could sustain itself without what is considered a key property in Canadian sports broadcasting. However, They also acknowledged the network's continuing rights to IIHF hockey tournaments, the Canadian Football League, and TSN's growing regional NHL rights portfolio, including the Maple Leafs Euro, which would, beginning in the same season, air 26 games on TSN post-season. In a series of Twitter posts by TSN personality Bob McKenzie, he explained that even with the loss of national NHL rights, TSN's goal was to remain the source for all things hockey through its analysis programs and regional coverage, and that this was not the first time that TSN had lost its cable rights to the NHL. On May 6, 2014, TSN announced that it would launch 3 new channels: Euro TSN 3, TSN 4, and TSN 5, in September 2014 to coincide with the network's 30th anniversary. TSN President Stuart Johnston described the expansion as an important evolution for the network, as it would allow TSN to make more efficient use of its portfolio of sports properties. The network promoted that these new channels would allow TSN to broadcast a larger amount of ESPN content and live events, particularly including expanded coverage of major events with multiple games occurring simultaneously. Although the expansion was discussed by TSN staff as early as 2012, critics considered the loss of NHL rights to Rogers to be a catalyst for the move, as TSN attempts to defend its position as the largest specialty television service in Canada in terms of total revenue. The launch date of these new channels were pushed up to August 25, 2014 in order to allow multi-court coverage of the 2014 US Open tennis tournament, which began the same day. TSN also announced that it would use these new channels to house regional NHL games beginning in the 2014-15 season, featuring the Jets, Maple Leafs, and Ottawa Senators. Channels. As is permitted for all Category C sports services, the TSN license is permitted to have multiple channels, and currently encompasses all of the channels listed in the table below. However, unlike premium services like the Movie Network, subscribers receiving one TSN channel are not necessarily automatically entitled to receive all additional channels, and in many cases they are only available by paying a separate charge to a service provider. For example, until 2013, Rogers cable customers were required to subscribe to the HD Specialty Pack add-on in order to receive TSN HD. On many providers including Rogers, TSN 1, 3, 4 and 5 are included in a single package, but TSN 2 is still provided only as part of a separate higher-tier package. On May 6, 2014, TSN announced plans to launch 3 additional multiplex channels, for a total of 5 24-hour national channels. The existing TSN service was replaced by 4 regionally focused channels: Euro TSN 1, 3, 4, and 5 Euro, similar to the Sportsnet regional channels. All 5 channels are available nationally, but on most local providers, the channel location previously occupied by TSN's primary service was filled by the appropriate regional feed. While major sports telecasts are simulcast across TSN 1, 3, 4, and 5 to ensure national coverage, alternative studio shows and live events can also be split across the channels. The feeds carry a small amount of programming tailored towards their respective regions, including simulcasts of NHL-oriented lunch hour shows from TSN radio stations in their relevant region, and regional NHL coverage. When TV listings and promotions make a reference to a program airing on the TSN network, or simply TSN without disambiguation, it can normally be assumed that the program will be simulcast on TSN 1, 3, 4 and 5. Their launch date was originally announced as September 1, 2014, to coincide with the 30th anniversary of TSN's launch, but was moved up to August 25 in order to accommodate multiple court coverage throughout the 2014 US Open. Prior to the launch of the additional feeds, Bell executives stated that the expanded 5-channel service would be offered for the same rate as was charged at the time for TSN and TSN2 together. Notwithstanding this claim, some providers, including Shaw Cable, have elected to charge extra for some of the new feeds. Most major Canadian television providers carry the new channels upon their launch, including Bell, Cogeco, Viasalink, MTS, SaskTel, Shaw, Source Cable, Rogers, and TELUS. Videotron, a cable provider which primarily serves the province of Quebec, was a notable holdout for the new feeds. On October 13, a Monday night football game was left unavailable in English to Videotron subscribers because TSN5 Euro, the only feed at Corrida Euro, was airing a regional Ottawa Senators Florida Panthers NHL game. On October 16, 2015, Videotron president Mornan Bruyette responded to complaints by subscribers surrounding the incident, and confirmed that it had reached a deal in September to carry the new feeds. The addition of TSN1 to the lineup was accelerated to October 20, 2014 to ensure the availability of that week's Monday night football game, with the remainder added on October 29, 2014. The current TSN feeds, and any programming unique to each feed as per TSN's current TV schedules, is shown below. The other sports channels owned or managed by Bell Media and ESPN Inc., including ESPN Classic, NHL Network, and the French-language raw copyright so does sports and related channels, operate under separate licenses. Former channels Programming Studio programming TSN's flagship news program is Sportscenter, a sports news program airing several times throughout the day. Formerly known as Sports Desk, it was revamped to closer resemble ESPN's own Sportscenter in the fall of 2001 as part of a corporate restructuring, closer aligning itself with minority owner ESPN. In 2006, a new studio was built in order to prepare the show for its transition to high-definition becoming the first daily news program in Canada to be produced in HD beginning on September 25, 2006. Other original programs on TSN include the daily hockey news program That's Hockey, the talk show Off the Record with Michael Landsberg, the automotive news magazine Motoring, and TSN The Reporters. In connection with ESPN's minority ownership in TSN, the network has a long-term agreement with ESPN International for the Canadian rights to ESPN original and studio programs, including Pardon the Interruption, Around the Horn, Sunday NFL Countdown, NFL Live, Baseball Tonight, ESPN FC, and ESPN Films documentaries including the 30 for 30 series, among others, though it does not always air these programs simultaneously with their U.S. broadcasts. Significant domestic broadcast rights Hockey, TSN is a major broadcaster of ice hockey in Canada. From 1987 to 1998, and again from 2002 to 2014, TSN held national cable rights to broadcast the NHL in Canada. Under its most recent contract, TSN aired regular season games on weeknights and Sundays, including exclusivity on Wednesday nights, as well as various Stanley Cup playoffs games, as the league's secondary rights holder after CBC Sports. Its most recent contract expired at the end of the 2013-14 NHL season. Rogers Communications secured a 12-year contract for sole national rights beginning with the following season. TSN's then-parent company CTV Global attempted to strike a similar exclusive deal in 2006, but was not successful. CTV acquired the rights to the hockey theme, which has been the theme song of Hockey Night in Canada for 40 years, after the CBC decided not to renew its rights to the theme song in June 2008 amid a legal dispute with its composer, Dolores Clemen. A re-orchestrated version of the tune has been used for hockey broadcasts on TSN and RDS since fall 2008. TSN continues to hold 3 regional, English-language rights contracts: Winnipeg Jets, 60 games per season through 2020 Euro 21. Aired regionally on TSN 3. Toronto Maple Leafs, 26 games per season beginning in 2014-15. Aired regionally on TSN 4. Ottawa Senators, 60 games per season beginning in 2014-15. Aired regionally on TSN 5. These games are subject to blackout outside of the team's designated home markets. TSN also held regional English-language rights to the Montreal Canadiens through the 2013 Euro 14 season. They have since been acquired by Sportsnet. TSN also has a broadcasting contract with Hockey Canada, giving it the rights to broadcast the IIHF World Junior Championships, Men's and Women's World Hockey Championship, the IIHF World U18 Championship, Allen Cup, Royal Bank Cup, Spengler Cup, Telus Cup and Esso Cup. In the 2014-15 season, TSN began to broadcast a package of NCAA Division I college hockey games, including regular season games, and the Frozen Four. Since the 2008 season, TSN has been the exclusive broadcaster of the Canadian Football League, airing all of the league's games, including the season-ending Grey Cup. TSN broadcasts Canada's major curling tournaments. It holds exclusive rights to Curling Canada's Season of Champions Series through 2020. It also organizes the Pinty's All-Star Curling Skins Game, an annual skins curling tournament. TSN also broadcasts Toronto Raptors games produced by Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which included 47 games across TSN and TSN2 in the 2010 Euro 11 season. TSN acquired Canadian rights to Major League Soccer in 2011, airing 24 matches during the 2011 season that involved the league's Canadian clubs, Toronto FC and Vancouver Whitecaps FC. Its slate expanded to 30 games in 2012 with the debut of the Montreal Impact in the league. TSN's channels broadcast a package of other regular season games, the MLS All-Star Game, MLS Cup Playoffs and the MLS Cup. In January 2014, TSN announced that it would take over broadcast rights to Whitecaps games beginning in the 2014 Major League Soccer season, under a separate deal. On October 27, 2011, Bell Media and TSN announced that they had secured broadcast rights for FIFA soccer tournaments from 2015 to 2022. The rights include the 2018 FIFA World Cup, 2022 FIFA World Cup, and the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup hosted by Canada. TSN has hosted much of Canada's supplementary Olympic coverage, being the first pay television channel in the world to ever broadcast the Olympics with the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary, and having been part of the CBC's coverage from 1998 to 2008. In 2010, TSN began to participate in CTV and Rogers' joint broadcast rights to the Olympic Games for 2010 and 2012. TSN continued to be a part of CBC's coverage of the 2014 Winter Olympics, but also in conjunction with Sportsnet. The channel also previously held rights to the country's university football playoff tournaments, including the Hardy Cup, UTEC Bowl, Mitchell Bowl and the Vanier Cup Championship. The Hardy Cup coverage reverted to Shaw TV in 2014 while the UTEC, Mitchell and Vanier contests moved to Sportsnet, who acquired exclusive rights to CIS tournaments in May 2013. TSN has also historically been a broadcaster for Major League Baseball in Canada, as its former parent company, Labatt, was also the owner of the Toronto Blue Jays. Under Rogers' ownership, TSN continued to sub-license a package 25 of Blue Jays games per season, with the rest of the games televised by the co-owned Sportsnet, who is also the primary rights holder of Major League Baseball in Canada. In 2010, TSN traded its Blue Jays games to Sportsnet for rights to ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. In 2014, TSN reached a deal directly with MLB International for Canadian rights to all of ESPN's MLB coverage, adding Monday Night Baseball and Wednesday Night Baseball beginning in the 2014 season. In May 2011, Bell Media and Skate Canada announced a 10-year rights agreement making CTV, TSN and RDS the official broadcasters of Skate Canada. As part of the agreement, CTV, TSN and RDS acquired exclusive multimedia rights to all of Skate Canada Euro unregistered trademark as premier domestic events including Skate Canada International and the Canadian Figure Skating Championships. Since 2011, TSN has carried the Rugby World Cup, also with live and tape delayed coverage. Significant international broadcast rights along with its coverage of Canadian events. TSN also airs coverage of international sporting events, often simulcast from other broadcasters. TSN also currently airs Formula One and NASCAR racing events. TSN2 carries a weekly early NFL game, NBC Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. TSN also carries some of ESPN's NFL analysis and highlight programs, including NFL Live, Sunday NFL Countdown, and Monday Night Countdown. In December 2013, Bell Media and the NFL agreed on a multi-year extension of their broadcast partnership, which will see more NFL games on TSN, including the Sunday 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. regular season games. TSN also currently serves as the main Canadian outlet for TNT's NBA coverage, along with exclusive Canadian rights to the NBA Finals. TSN is the exclusive rights holder in Canada for all 4 tennis Grand Slams. In 2012, the channel signed multi-year extensions for the Australian Open, French Open and Wimbledon. On May 16, 2013, TSN signed a multi-year extension for the US Open. TSN is also the rights holder for all 4 of golf's major championships: the Masters, US Open, British Open and PGA Championship. In addition, it carries the Ryder Cup and President's Cup and simulcasts the RBC Canadian Open. On February 1, 2011, TSN announced that they had acquired the rights to the Tour de France in a multi-year deal. This deal ultimately lasted for 3 years. The rights were acquired by Sportsnet in 2014. In 2011, as part of a larger deal with ESPN International, TSN acquired rights to the NCAA Men's Division I Basketball Championship. In the 2013-14 season, TSN began to air more regular season games, with particular emphasis on the Kansas Jayhawks due to their addition of Thornhill, Ontario native Andrew Wiggins. As of the 2013-14 season, TSN jointly holds Canadian rights to the Premier League with Sportsnet through 2016. In August 2009, TSN and TSN2 began airing live and delayed coverage of Australian rules football. Selected games from the Australian Football League Premiership season and final series, including the AFL Grand Final, are broadcast live or on delay every weekend. On December 19, 2014, Bell Media announced that it had acquired rights to the UEFA Champions League and Europa League for TSN and RDS beginning in 2015, in conjunction with beIN Sports. On December 22, 2014, it was also announced that TSN had also acquired Canadian rights to UFC Mixed Martial Arts, beginning in 2015. TSN's networks will air all major events, including PPV preliminaries, domestic UFC Fight Night events, and The Ultimate Fighter. TSN will partner with Fight Network to produce ancillary programming, and broadcast international Fight Night events, and preliminaries for non-PPV events. The contract also includes French-language rights for RDS. Rights to both in Canada were previously held by Sportsnet. Through minority owner ESPN, TSN also holds exclusive Canadian broadcast rights to several other events which ESPN either owns outright, such as the X Games, or for which it owns the worldwide broadcast rights, such as the College Football Playoff, the World Series of Poker, and various NHRA events. Professional wrestling: TSN featured live professional wrestling in the form of World Wrestling Entertainment's flagship show, WWE Raw, for over a decade. However, the Raw program, which aired live, occasionally had been censored live for extremely violent scenes, or when female wrestlers or characters were assaulted by male wrestlers. These actions are supposed to be in order to meet Canadian broadcast standards, with repeat broadcasts often more heavily edited. This disappointed many wrestling fans over the years, and is unusual since the violence of wrestling scenes are not significantly different from other television programs aired on regular Canadian networks. It was expected that in fall 2006, when TSN started airing the ESPN iteration of Monday Night Football, that WWE Raw would air on tape delay during the NFL season. However, WWE instead decided to move the program to rival sports network The Score rather than air on tape delay, although Raw was still aired on a 15-minute delay due to limits on the amount of live programming that channel could air in a week. As of Raw 1000 in 2012, the program is aired without a tape delay. The final episode of WWE Raw on TSN aired July 31, 2006. The 2007 WWE Hall of Fame induction ceremony was also aired on the network, but no other professional wrestling programming is known to have aired on the channel since then. Off the Record with Michael Landsberg continues to occasionally feature professional wrestlers in unscripted interviews, which it has throughout its run. In 2004, both TSN and Total Nonstop Action Wrestling erroneously announced that Impact would air on the network, although that deal was never completed and the article on the TSN Wrestling page was taken down shortly after. However, TSN's French-language sister network RDS airs the program. In past years, TSN also aired shows from the American Wrestling Association, Stampede Wrestling and World Championship Wrestling Monday Nitro, as well as producing a one-hour show called Pro Wrestling Plus, which featured highlights from various promotions and was hosted by Stampede announcer Ed Hallen. That program was the Canadian equivalent of the syndicated American program Pro Wrestling This Week. Personalities. Programming. Original programs CFL on TSN, a Euro-Live coverage of CFL games with Rod Smith in studio and a panel joining him to analyze the games, a Euro Jock Climmy, Matt Dunigan and Chris Schultz. Friday broadcasts are known as Friday Night Football, curling on TSN, a Euro-Live coverage of the Curling Canada, Continental Cup of Curling, the TSN Skins Game, the World Curling Championships, and Olympic Curling. NASCAR Canadian Tire Series, a Euro-Live coverage of select NASCAR Canadian Tire Series races, TSN Hockey, a Euro-Live coverage of NHL games. Hosted by James Duthie. Analysts include Bob McKenzie, Darren Dreger, Pierre LeBrun, Aaron Ward and Mark Crawford. Off the Record, a Euro talk show featuring various personalities discussing the latest sports headlines with host Michael Landsberg. Sportscenter, a Euro flagship news show on the network, TSN The Reporters, a Euro Sunday roundtable debate that examines the issues making headlines with Dave Hodge and featuring top Canadian sports journalists. That's Hockey, a Euro features news and reports from the National Hockey League, hosted by Gino Reeder. That's Hockey Tonight, a Euro late-night NHL wrap-up show, hosted by Glenn Schiller. TSN Pins Game A. Euro Annual Bowling Championships involving both 5-pin bowling and 10-pin bowling. This and the CBC coverage of another bowling championships were later consolidated into one tournament, the Canadian Bowling Championships. TSN Skins Game, a Euro Annual Curling Bonspiel, Toronto Raptors Basketball, a Euro about 20 games a year. Produced by NBA TV Canada. Former programs Vancouver Grizzlies Basketball, Montreal Expos Baseball, Toronto Blue Jays Baseball. International distribution, Jamaica, a Euro distributed on Flow Cable Systems. Bahamas, a Euro distributed on Cable Bahamas Systems. References. External links, TSN.